That he who blesseth himself in the earth shall bless himself in the God of truth, and he that sweareth in the earth shall swear by the God of truth, because the former troubles are forgotten, and because they are hid from thine eyes. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered, nor come into mind. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people. And the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying. There shall be no more things an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old. But the sinner, being 100 years old, shall be accursed. And they shall build houses and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. They shall not build, and another inhabit. They shall not plant, and another eat. Whereas the days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth for trouble, for they are the seed of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. And it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the bullock, and dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, saith the Lord.
This is exactly what the Most High is going to do with his elect, with the nation of Israel in general. Because the nation of Israel will be a nation of superhumans on the planet Earth. And this is what's coming.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Al-Shah. All right, and this is what I want to get into this morning. You know, just a continuation on the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 20, and also chapter 21. Okay, and we made it to the point, you know, as King David, you know, had to flee, you know, the palace, go into the wilderness. You know, there was civil war. You know, his son, you know, rebelled against him, Absalom. All right, and eventually, you know, they clashed in the wilderness, and King David forces, you know, overwhelmed, you know, the forces of Absalom. You know, the Lord was still, you know, with King David. You know, so even though the Lord was chastening King David, you know, punishing him for, you know, his sin, all right, he was still with him. You know, his mercy never departed, you know, King David. Okay, through all the trials. Okay, just like his mercy doesn't depart from us, you know, through our trials. All right, and now what we're seeing is King David's throne being reestablished in Israel. Okay, but there's still rebellion, because that was one of the punishments for what King David had done. Okay, was it was going to be a rebellion, always in his house, in his kingdom. So you still have small rebellions, because what Absalom did, he set a precedent, for all right, people to rebel against the king, certain men, to try to form, coups and revolts, okay, against King David's throne. All right, so it's one more, all right, that we're going to see, show his head. All right, it's going to be judged. All right, and King David, throne is going to be established. All right, now let's go here and see. Now we've made it to the latter end, of King David's life. This is towards the end of his rulership. Okay, and the Lord, mercy never departed. Now let's go here to 2 Samuel 20:1. All right, it said the revolt of Sheba. It said there happened to be a troublemaker there named Sheba, son of Bakri, a man from the tribe of Benjamin. Sheba blew a ram's horn and began to chant, "Down with the dynasty of David." Okay, down with the dynasty of David. So there's another rebel, this guy Sheba. Okay, there's this Benjaminite, which Benjamin. Some Benjaminites were still bitter, about the transfer of rulership, from the tribe of Benjamin to the tribe of Judah. Okay, but in the spirit, it was always meant to be that. Matter of fact, let's get there, because even in the book of Genesis, okay, Judah was always meant, okay, to be, the head tribe, okay, the tribe of Yahweh. This is Genesis 49:10. It said the scepter, okay, and what is a scepter? Let's get this real quick. What is a scepter? All right, it goes into Shabbat. Okay, now you go into it. It says a trunchkin, a scepter, a mark of authority. Okay, a mark of authority. Okay, so the scepter, all right, the mark of authority, dealing with the kings, the chief, okay, tribe amongst Israel, okay, will go to Judah. All right, the scepter should never depart. All right, it says Genesis 49:10 said the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff. All right, the ruler's staff from his descendants until, all right, the coming of the one to whom it belongs, which is Yahweh Shai, which he comes from that lineage of Judah. Okay, to whom all nations will honor. Okay, beginning with the tribes. You see, so it was always set up, that Judah, would be the head tribe, and through that tribe of Judah, you will have, our great King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Yahweh Shai. All right, so you had, during this time, Benjamin, certain Benjaminite men, were bitter, about the transfer of power, from Benjamin to Judah. Okay, and every now and then you would get, a rebel, even that guy Shemaiah, that was following King David, cursing him, when he was on the move from Absalom. Okay, he was of the kinsman of Saul. So you had certain Benjaminites, still bitter about that, that transfer of the scepter from Benjamin to Judah. Okay, and in the kingdom, all 12 tribes will be kings. All right, the men of the 12 tribes, beginning with the first fruits, will be king in their own respect, but there's going to be an order. Okay, matter of fact, let's get there real quick, um, and then we'll read this account. Uh, in 1 Corinthians 15, I'm gonna go back to the KJV. All right, so you go here to 1 Corinthians 15, and 23. All right, First Corinthians 15 and 23 says, but every man in his own order. Okay, every man in his own order is speaking of the order of the kingdom. Okay, Yahweh Shai, all right, the Alpha, okay, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, okay, the head of the nation of Israel. Okay, it says Yahweh Shai, the first fruits of 144,000. Afterward, they are, all right, they that are Yahweh Shai's at his coming, the rest of the 130 elect. Okay, so there's an order, Yahweh Shai, those first fruits, all right, the 144,000, all right, and then the rest of the 1/3 that belong to Yahweh Shai, it is coming. Okay, so there's an order, all right, amongst, okay, the aristocracy that's to come. Okay, and Judah, is the head tribe amongst Israel, to whom the top two men, Yahweh Shai and King David, all right, are of their tribe. You see? So go here, all right, and it's enough blessing and honor and glory for everyone. It's more than enough. Okay? No one's going to be envious, or covetous, all right, over another brother's office or rank in the kingdom. Okay? Well, this is our 2 Samuel 21. It says, and there happened to be there a man, Belial, whose name was Sheba, all right, the son, all right, of Bichri, all right. Let me get this back in the NLT. Okay? From the tribe of Benjamin. Sheba blew a ram's horn and began to chant, down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. Come on, ye men of Israel, back to your homes. So this rebellious nigga. All right. So all the men of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, son of Bichri. But the men of Judah stayed with their king and escorted him from the Jordan River to Jerusalem. When David came, all right, to his place in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines he had left to look after the palace and placed them in seclusion, all right, because Absalom had dealt with him. Okay, so he put them away. All right, he said their needs were provided for, so they still had comfortable life. They were straight. But he just didn't deal with them anymore. After Absalom dealt with them. As the scriptures say, shall a man go into a woman after she's been with another man. Okay, I think that's Jeremiah 3 and 1 and 2. Okay, then it speaks about how the Lord had mercy on us for our spiritual fornication. But that's another topic. It said their needs were provided for, but he no longer slept with them. So each of them lived like a widow until she died. Then the king told Amasa, mobilize the army of Judah within 3 days and report back at that time. So Amasa went out to notify Judah, but it took him longer than the time he had been given. Okay, so Amasa, remember, he was just with the forces of Absalom. Okay, so Amasa, he's a Judite, all right, and King David gave him 3 days, to go mobilize the armies of Judah, and it was all a test. One thing about it, King David was very, strategic, okay, and how he moved. He was like a he was like a mobster, man. Like a mob boss, man. How he was very calculated and how he did things, man. All right, said then David sent to Abishai, Sheba, son of Bichri, is going to hurt us more than Absalom did. Quick, take my troops and chase after him before he gets into the fortified town where we can't reach him. So Abishai and Joab, together with the king's bodyguard and all the mighty warriors, set out from Jerusalem to go after Sheba. And they arrived at the great stone in Gibeon. Amasa met them. Okay, so Joab was wearing his military tunic with a dagger strapped to his belt. As he stepped forward to greet Amasa, he stripped the dagger, all right, from his sheath. Okay, it says, "How are you, my cousin?" Okay, so Joab, here you go, But Amasa, this nigga was wicked anyway. All right, so a lot of times, Joab will clean things up. He a lot of times Joab, he saw all right, in spaces where King David didn't see, so he cleaned up a lot of King David's blind spots. He tied up loose ends. Okay, it says, "How are you, my cousin?" Joab said, and took him by the beard with his right hand, as though to kiss him. Amasa didn't notice the dagger in his left hand, and Joab stabbed him in the stomach with it, so that his insides gushed out on the ground. All right, these were trained assassins, man. You know, hey, the men that was around King David were all trained, highly trained assassins, man. He hit him one time with that dagger, okay, and every his insides fell out, okay. It said Joab did not need to strike again, okay, precision. And the master soon died. Joab and his brother Abishai left him lying there and continued after Sheba. One of Joab's young men shouted to a master troop, "If you are for Joab and David, come and follow Joab." But Amasa lay in his blood in the middle of the road, and Joab's men, all right, and Joab's man saw that everyone was stopping to stare at him. So he pulled him off the road into a field and threw a cloak over him, all right, dragged him out the way, okay. With Amasa's body out of the way, everyone went on with Joab to capture Sheba, son of Bekrai. So now you have, Joab, and Abishai, his brother, all right, King David nephews, you know, they're, you know, going through and getting their allegiance, back to King David. The allegiance of the troops back to King David. So they're doing away with all rebels. Okay, they're doing away with all rebels at this point. All right. It says, meanwhile, Sheba traveled through all the tribes of Israel and eventually came to the town of Abel Beth Maach. All right, Makkah. All the members of his own clan, the big Christ, assembled for battle and followed him into the town. When Joab's forces arrived, they attacked Abel Beth Makkah. They built a siege ramp against the town's fortification and began battering down, okay, the wall. But a wise woman, okay, a wise woman. All right, here we go. This is another example, okay, of a wise woman. And you see how she gonna move. It says, but a wise woman in the town called out to Joab, "Listen to me, Joab. Come over here so I can talk to you." As he approached, the woman asked, "Are you Joab?" "I am," he replied. So she said, "Listen carefully to your servant." "I'm listening," he said. Then she continued, "There used to be a saying, if you want to settle an argument, ask advice at the town of Abel. It says, I am one who is peace loving and faithful in Israel, but you are destroying an important town in Israel. Why do you want to devour what belongs to the Lord?" And Joel replied, "Believe me, I don't want to devour or destroy your town. That's not my purpose. All I want is a man named Sheba, son of Bekrai, from the hill of the country of Ephraim, who had revolted against King David. If you hand over this one man to me, I will leave the town in peace." So they're getting ready to take down the walls to get to this man. So this woman, all right, of the town, scripture call her wise, she comes and begins to negotiate. Like, look, what, why is this happening? And it's King and Joab and letting her know, okay, this is her response. It says, "All right," the woman replied, "we will throw his head over the wall to you." Then the woman went to all the people, right, with her wise advice, and they cut off Sheba's head and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the ram's horn and called his troops back, all right, from the attack. They all returned to their homes, and Joab returned, all right, to the king at Jerusalem. Okay, so she was like, "Look, what's going on?" And then Joab explained they looking for this one man, and she like, "Shit, I'll be right back." So she gave, she let them know what was going on in the city, and those men of the city, hey, they off with his head, all right, and they threw his head over the wall, okay, and they solved their problem, man. Okay, and the scripture tell you that, man. They didn't want, see, in this society, it's in nigga culture today. They protect the worst people. You see that a nigga like that will be well protected amongst niggas, man. Okay, but in the righteous setting, no, that nigga got to go. Okay, see, in nigga culture, they'll let one nigga ruin, all right, the lives of 50 people. Okay, they'll let this one nigga, just run amok, protect this nigga, all right, hide this nigga out, and this nigga is just a complete demon, all right, around the way. Okay, but nah, man, this nigga was a problem, and they got right to the problem. That nigga head went flying over the wall, man. Okay, got that nigga out of here, man. Okay, that's why when you go here, um, let's see, I think that's in book of Proverbs. Yep, it's the book of Proverbs 22:10. It says, "Cast out the scorner, and contention shall go out. Yeah, strife and reproach, okay, shall cease." Okay, let's go here. See what it says in the NLT. All right, so they cast out the scorner, and contention went out with them. Okay, you get rid of the problem, man. All right, nigga culture babysits and glorifies and worship the problem. Okay, it said drive out the mocker, and it's in NIV, and out goes strife. Quarrels and insults are ended. Okay, and that's what we seen. They got rid of the problem. They nipped it in the bud. All right, ain't no way people are gonna die for this wicked nigga, man. Okay, it said throw out the mocker in the LT, and fighting goes too. Quarrels and insults will disappear, man. Okay, so they got rid of their problem quick. Okay, they cast it out the scorner. That's what remember on Men Society. All right, when Cain granddaddy threw him out, that's the scripture he read, Proverbs 22:10. He read that scripture, and Cain said, "What did that mean?" Said, "You got to go." His granddaddy said, "Shit, you got to go." Cain and old dog was starting up all this shit. You know, and granddaddy got to the point like, "Look, nigga, you got to go." He read that precept, and Cain like, what did that mean? He said, "You got to go." You know, this is all the book of Luke, chapter 19 and verse 27. All right. This is Luke 19 and 27. It said, "But those my enemies run fact." I'm gonna jump down, you know. This is Luke 12 and Luke 19 verse 12. It says, "He said, therefore, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. And he called his 10 servants and delivered them 10 pounds and said unto them, Occupy till I come," which we're doing now. Okay. So Yahweh Shah is that nobleman that went, he's in the spiritual realm at the right hand of the Father. And we'll occupy until he comes. But what do you have? All right. But his citizens hated him, certain Israelites. Okay. As we can see, there's Israelites that hate Yahweh Shah. All right. And sent a message after him saying, "We will not have this man to reign over us." Okay. So just as Sheba, was rebelling against the authority of King David, all right, you have Israelites rebelling now against the authority of Yahweh Shah. And that's going to be dealt with, man. Even after the destruction, even after the triumph of Yahweh Shah, all right, it's going to be rebels that's going to have to be, all right, purged, man. All right, they're not going to be down with the throne. Okay, Luke 19 and 27. "But those my enemies, which would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me," man. Okay, see, ancient style judgment is coming back to the earth, man. Okay, that Eastern, nobility that of kings. That way is coming back to the earth, man. You see, people are so comfortable, all right, in this society where you can, where you're liberated to be as wicked, you know, to say anything, damn near do anything that's in wickedness, man, with no consequence. All right. But when your house shot, okay, come and wreck shop, man, it's gonna be a whole different atmosphere in the earth, man. Okay. Our rebellion, all right, will cease. Now let's go back to let's go back here to Second Samuel 20 and 23. It says, "Now Joab was the commander of the army of Israel. Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, was the captain of the king's bodyguard. Um, and Dun the Rum was in charge of the labor force. Jehoshaphat, son of Elihud, was a royal historian. Sheba was the court secretary. Zadok and Abathar were the priests. And Ra, all right, a descendant of Jaar, was David's personal priest. Okay, so now you get here to the book of 2 Samuel 21 and 1. All right, now you have this dispute, happen, dealing with, a famine was in the land, and we have this dispute with the Gibeonites, so we're going to go into their history real quick as well. So let's go here to the book of So let's go here to the book of Second Samuel 21 and 1. All right, it says there was famine during David's reign that lasted for 3 years. So David asked the Lord about it, and the Lord said, the famine has come because Saul and his family are guilty of murdering the Gibeonites. All right, which the Gibeonites are uh, Hamites. All right, and we're going to go into why, Saul was guilty, because he pretty much broke a treaty that was established during the time of Joshua. Okay, which we'll get into it. It says, so the king summoned the Gibeonites. They were not part of Israel, but were all, I said, they were not part of Israel, but were all that was left of the nation of the Amorites. The people of Israel had sworn not to kill them, but Saul and his zeal for Israel and Judah, all right, impulsive, had tried to wipe them out, okay? Impulsive nigga, man. He always did what he wanted to do, and it always led to a ripple effect. So they still paying. Israel is still paying for bad decisions of Saul, and this nigga is dead, man. You know, just like niggas in the world. Samuel 21 and 3 said, David asked him, what can I do for you? How can I make amends so that you will bless the Lord's people again? Well, money can't settle this matter between us and the family of Saul. The Gibeonites replied, neither can we demand the life of anyone in Israel. What can I do then? David asked, just tell me, and I will do it for you. They replied, it was Saul who planned to destroy us and to keep us from having any place at all in the territory of Israel. So let 7 of Saul's sons be handed over to us, which is, descendants of Saul, people of Saul's family, his kinsmen, and we will execute them before the Lord at Gibeon on the mountain, all right, of the Lord. All right, the king said, I will do it. Okay, because remember, there's a famine, all right, and the Lord is letting them know, why is a famine? Because Saul and what he did, he broke, an oath. There was two, the Lord dealing with the Gibeonites. Okay, so matter of fact, let's get that history real quick. In the book of Joshua. All right. So you go here. Um, get to the point. Yeah, I started one. It said, now all the kings, this is when Joshua was coming, through and wrecking shop with these Hamites, these Canaanites. All right. It says, now all the kings of the Jordan River heard about what happened. These were the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites who lived in the hill country in the western foothills and along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea as far north as the Lebanon mountains. These kings combined their armies to fight as one against Joshua and the Israelites. But when the people of Gideon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to deception to save themselves. They sent ambassadors to Joshua, loading their donkeys with weathered saddlebags and old patched wineskins. They put on worn out patched saddles and rag clothes, and it says, and the bread they took with them was dry and moldy. Okay, so they're coming with deception. They're seeing what the Lord is doing with Joshua and those militaries and how they running through all their kinsmen, the rest of them Canaanites. So the people of Gibeon like, shit, we gonna try something else, because their fighting don't work. You see, you can't fight against these people, you know. And we're gonna go also into the law of warfare concerning this as well. It says when they arrived at the camp of Israel at Gilgal, they told Joshua and the men of Israel, we have come from a distant land to ask you to make a peace treaty with us. Okay, so they're asking for a peace treaty. Okay, now when you go into the law, all right, Deuteronomy dealing with the law of warfare, when you jump down to verses 10 and 11, it says, Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 10, it says, as you approach a town to attack it, you must first offer its people terms of peace. If they accept your peace terms and open the gates to you, then all the people inside will serve you in forced labor. Okay? So there was a law of warfare that we had to offer, all right, terms of peace before we would attack. Okay? And how they responded to those terms of peace determined how, we would respond, all right, militarily. Okay? So if they accepted terms of peace, then they would just be put to tribute and labor. Okay? There was a law. Okay? So these Gibeonites, they came, with terms of peace, you know? So when you go back to the book of Joshua, okay, they applied this law. Okay? When you go back to Joshua 9, all right? This back in Joshua 9 and 6, it says, when they arrived at the camp of Israel at Gilgal, they told Joshua and the men of Israel, we had come from a distant land to ask you to make a peace treaty with us. And the Israelites replied to these Hivites, how do we know you don't live nearby? For if you do, we cannot make a treaty, all right, with you. They replied, we are your servants, but who are you? Joshua demanded, where do you come from? Then answered, all right, it says, they answered, your servants have come from a very distant country. We have heard of the might of the Lord Yahweh Shema Shai, your power, and all he did in Egypt. So the Lord made a name for himself in that time, man, through judgment, as the scriptures say. We have also heard what he did to the two Amorite kings, east of Jordan River, King Sihon, all right, of Heshbon, and King Og of Bashan, all right, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all the people instructed us, take supplies for a long journey, go meet with the people of Israel and tell them, we are your servant. Please make a treaty with us. This bread was hot from the ovens when we left our home, but now, as you can see, it is dry and moldy. These wineskins were new when we filled them, but now they are old and split open, and our clothing and sandals are worn from our very long journey. So the Israelites examined their food, but they did not consult the Lord Yahweh Shema Shai. Then Joshua made a peace treaty with them and guaranteed their safety, and the leaders of the community ratified their agreement with a binding oath. So there was a peace treaty made, and it was ratified with a binding oath before the Lord, and they didn't consult. the Lord before they made this decision. Okay, but the decision is made now. Okay, 3 days after making a treaty, they learned that these people actually lived nearby. The Israelites set out at once to investigate and reach their towns in 3 days. The names of these towns were Gibeon, Kiprah, Barath, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack the towns, for the Israelite leaders had made a vow to them in the name of the Lord, Yahweh Shema Shai, the power of Israel. The people of Israel grumbled against their leaders because of this treaty. Jake didn't like that, but they made a treaty before the Lord. They ratified it before the Lord. But the leaders replied, since we have sworn an oath in the presence of the Lord, the power of Israel, we cannot touch them. Okay, showing you the men of their word, you know. You see, it said this was, honor was a major thing back then. Your word, it meant everything, as a man. This is what we must do. We must learn. He said we must let them live, for divine anger will come upon us if we broke, all right, our oath. Okay, and this is what Saul did. And this is why the divine punishment, that famine was coming from the Lord because of what Saul did, man. You know, it said, let them live. So they made them woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community as the Israelite leaders, all right, directed. Okay. Joshua called together the Gibeonites and said, why did you lie to us? Why did you say that you live in a distant land and you live right among us? May you be cursed from now on. You will always be servants, okay, that labor force who cut wood and carry water for the house of my power. All right. They replied, we did it because we, your servants, were clearly told that the Lord, your power, commanded his servant Moses to give you the entire land to destroy all the people living in it. So we fear greatly for our lives because of you. This is why we have done this. So they did this out of fear. Okay, it said, now we are at your mercy. Do to us whatever you think is right. So Joshua did not allow the people of Israel to kill them, but they made the Gibeonites the woodcutters and water carriers for the community of Israel and for the altar of the Lord, wherever the Lord will choose to build it. And this is what they do to this day. All right, so they was put into captivity. All right, they was made to pay tribute and put into captivity, but they couldn't be touched, because it was a treaty, it was a pact that was made. All right, and King Saul, all right, he went against that. Okay, so you go back here, all right, to 2 Samuel 21, and 7 said the king spared Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, who was Saul's grandson, because the oath, going back to an oath, David and Jonathan had sworn before the Lord. But he gave them Saul's two sons money, all right, uh, and it says, but he gave them. Let me see. It said, but the king took the two sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, who she bare unto Saul, Armani and Mephibosheth, which is another Mephibosheth, and the five sons of Michal, all right, the daughter of Saul, whom she brought up from Adriel, the sons of Barzillai, all right, the Mihalathite, saying that right. And he delivered them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them in the hill from before the Lord, and they fell all seven together and were put to death in the days of harvest, in the first days in the beginning, all right, of the barley harvest. And Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, took sackcloth and spread it for her upon the rock from the beginning of the harvest until water dropped upon them out of heaven, and suffered neither the birds of the air to rest on them by day, or the beasts of the field by night. So the mother of those sons, went out, and protected those bodies, okay, from the elements, and from the birds, okay, and the beasts of the field. And it was told David that Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, the concubine of Saul, had done. And David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from the men of Jabesh Gilead, which had stolen them from the street of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hanged them, when the Philistines had slain, all right, Saul in Gilboa. And he brought up from hence the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son, and they gathered the bones of them that were hanged, and the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son, buried they in the country of Benjamin and Zelah, in the sepulchre of Kish his father. And they performed all that the king commanded. And after that, Mosiah was entreated, okay, for the land, okay. So the Lord required, justice, for Saul breaking that oath, that was made, because that oath had his name on it. You see, the name of the Lord was on that oath, made with the Gibeonites. Okay, so that's why the Lord was investing into that, because his name was on that oath. Okay, and it says, once again the Philistines were at war with Israel, and when David and his men were in the thick of battle, David became weak and exhausted. Ish, all right, Ishbi Benob was a descendant of the giants. His bronze spearhead weighed more than 7 pounds, and he was armed with a new sword. He had cornered David and was about to kill him, but Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to David's rescue and killed the Philistine. Then David's men declared, "You are not going out to battle with us again. Why risk, all right, snuffing out the light of Israel?" So they considered, King David the light of Israel, you know. So they were like, "Look, look, you, hey, you ain't got it like you used to. We got it from here on out. You go sit the throne and handle the affairs, of the kingdom. All right, we got these niggas out here, So this is King David nephew. Like, look, you don't come out here no more. Like you need to be reserved. All right, you know what I'm saying? We got it from here on out." And said after this, there was another battle against the Philistines at Gob, and that they fought. All right, Sibaka from Hushai, all right, killed Soph, another descendant of the giants. Okay, so now we're seeing that, you know, well, in fact, let me finish. It said, during another battle of Gob, Elenan, son of Jar from Bethlehem, killed the brother of Goliath of Gath. The handle of his spear was thick as a weaver's beam. In another battle, the Philistines of Gath, they encountered a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all, who was also a descendant of the giants. But when he defied and taunted Israel, he was killed by Jonathan, the son of David's brother. All right, Shemiah. All right, another one of King David's nephews. He had some mighty nephews. It said these 4 Philistines were descendants of the giants of Gath, but David and his warriors killed them. Okay, so David, he set the tone, for killing these big ass niggas, man. Because before then, people were scared to go against these giants, man. All right, but when King David, killed Goliath, they set a precedent. His nephews and his warriors, his troops, they just, hey, it was just a normal thing to slay these giants, man. Through the will of Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, you know, and that's what we're doing now, man. We're slaying a giant of an empire, man, of Esau Edom, and that was getting ready to fall. All right, so yeah, that was the point. Lord will you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified once again. I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushua, Bahashim, Kakutash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to our younger brothers, and peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful like Shalom.